And now it gives me much pleasure to introduce Dr. and Reverend DeForest Soaries Jr. He is a Baptist minister, author, public advocate, and former Secretary of State of New Jersey. He preaches a gospel of personal finance, responsibility, and cultivating a value system of faith and action through spiritual growth, educational excellence, and economic empowerment. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Soaries.
Good morning, Comto. I'm so excited to see everybody here this morning. I heard about that boat ride, and any organization that can get up early in the morning after that kind of experience last night, you are a people of great faith. And beyond that, I'm always amazed at how much faith Comto has, although it is a purely secular organization. It is saturated with people of faith and continue to display works of faith. And you keep inviting me, and this morning you've invited me to speak for 5 minutes. You can't have more faith than that. It takes 5 minutes for a Baptist preacher to say good morning. But I'm grateful to God for this opportunity to be here, to my introducer, to Chairman Prince and all of the members of the Board of Directors, and to this outstanding, dynamic superstar who is now the new Chief Executive Officer of this great organization, Sister Miyoshi Moses. Let's give her a great round of applause. See, there goes that faith thing again. Here you pick somebody whose name suggests you got to cross the Red Sea. As I move around the country, I am keenly aware of the frustration that many people have as Martin Luther King Jr. seems to be reduced to the concept of a dreamer. And while I share the frustration that many of my peers share, Dr. King was much more than a dreamer. He was an activist. He was an advocate for social policy. He was a father and a husband and a pastor. I wouldn't discount this idea of being a dreamer. It was Dr. King himself who said, "I have a dream." And much of what we take for granted today, particularly in the political and social realm, Dr. King saw 50 years ago. And so I'm not insulted or offended or intimidated by this notion that Martin Luther King was a dreamer, because it takes dreams to build the kind of organization Comto has become. It took a dream of Reverend Jerry Moore when he was pastor of the 19th Street Baptist Church in Washington in the Nixon years to call together at Howard University a few people who represented possibilities in the transportation industry. And so in many ways, we're here because of the dream of Jerry Moore and the people like Shirley and others who worked with Jerry all of those years to create what is now, I believe, the most significant organization of minority executives in America. You can say amen. And I simply want to leave that with you, because as you move around this conference and as you interact with the various panels and speakers, as you huddle in the hallways and as you play golf on the fairways, you will be, I think, served well if you look for three types of people. A dreamer, in so many ways, is nothing but a big picture person. And the reason I believe in Comto is because Comto is more than a networking opportunity. Comto is more than a place to exchange business cards and share resumes. Comto has as its mission leveling a playing field, which by definition is not level. That's a big picture. And we need more big picture organizations. We need more big picture executives. We need more big picture individuals who will take time out of their professional schedules and give back to their community and pave the way for young people to come along. Because if you're not a big picture person, you only have two other options. You know, if you're not a big picture person, then you're either a small picture person or a no picture person. And a small picture person is the person that just is locked into the status quo, incarcerated by the right now, and has no sense of tomorrow. That person is just surviving. And you want to be careful. I don't think there'll be many small picture people roaming around here, but just in case, if you find a small picture person, run. This is not a meeting for small picture people. This is a meeting for people who understand that you are interconnected within the context of an industry that will never go away. How many organizations can say that we are a part of a system that will never go away? Telecommunications can't say that. When I was young, telecommunications meant having a TV with 7 stations, and one of them only showed when it didn't rain. And if your picture wasn't right, you had to get a coat hanger and fix the tube. That has all gone away. But last night I was in Washington. Tonight I'll be in New Orleans, and the only way I could get from Washington to New Orleans and stop by Boston on the way was transportation. Transportation is critical to the development of our communities. I was in Baltimore last week. One of the chief concerns in Baltimore is that the people in Baltimore can't get to the jobs outside of Baltimore. There is a solution for that. It's called transportation. I'll be in South Africa next week in rural areas where people need access to health care and employment and training, and the solution is transportation. You have the unenviable reality of being a part of an industry and a movement that will never go away. Until I learn to fly, until I learn to run faster than a train like a speeding bullet, you will be necessary for my survival. So what Comto has done is Comto has built an organization around an industry that will never go away. Small picture people only see the right now, whereas big picture people see themselves as a part of something that is so huge and so relevant, so significant, that it does require getting up early in the morning, even the day after a boat ride. Well, let me just drop this on you, and then I've got to run to New Orleans. There is also what I call no-picture people. Now, I know the very smart engineers and process people are out there saying there's no such thing as a no-picture person. Everybody has a picture. Well, a no-picture person is someone who has a picture, but the picture is the past. And since you can't change the past, you can't revisit the past, you can't do anything about the past, if your picture is only the past, then I would call you a no-picture person. Sister Moses is not Sister Cunningham. Brother Prince is not Reverend Moore, which means that what we have to do in the future as we go from our 44th year to our 45th year is to make sure we honor the past, we learn the past, we respect the past, but we cannot worship the past because the future awaits us, and what you don't want is for the future to catch you by surprise. The modalities will change, the relationships will change, the structures will change, and what we have to do is keep pace. If we're going to be an organization that creates a level playing field, we have to be on the field and play. So I thank you for your commitment, and I'm begging you to be the organization that the Dreamers saw 50 years ago. And if there were words that I'd like you to remember even long after I'm gone, it's the third verse of what we call the Negro National Anthem, the third verse. The first verse everybody knows, lift every voice and sing. But the third verse is the verse that should drive us into our future. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on our way, 44 years, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray, lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee. That would be a small picture person. Lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. That's a no picture person. Shadow beneath thy hand, may we forever stand true to our God and true to our native land. God bless you. Have a great conference.
Wow. So, I challenge you. I don't know if you're a big picture person or a small picture person or a no picture person, but I challenge you to think about that. Dr. Soaries, we want to thank you again for the time you spent with us. Thank you, sir. Now I have the opportunity to introduce you to Ms. Rose Yates. She is this year's conference planning co-chair. She is also the assistant general manager with MassDOT at the MBTA. I present to you Ms. Rose Yates, who will present our sponsors.
Good morning, everyone. That was fun last night, huh? I'd like to give special thanks to our sponsors this morning. As I name each of our organizations, could you please stand for a moment? AECOM, CH2M, and Parsons Brinkerhoff. Thank you all very much. Please join me in welcoming the Secretary of Transportation of Massachusetts and CEO of MassDOT, which includes all modes of transportation in Massachusetts. That's rail and transit, aeronautics, highway, and the Registry of Motor Vehicles. Please welcome Secretary Pollack.
So I do need to take a moment before I introduce this wonderful panel on innovation in our industry to just thank both Celia and Rose, as well as all the other folks at MassDOT and the T who've put an immense amount of time and effort into trying to help Comto make this conference as successful as I am hearing this is. So thank you, Rose. Thank you, Celia. So I just want to take a moment to introduce this panel by saying that we here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, not just in Boston and Cambridge, but throughout the Commonwealth, see ourselves as an innovation leader. And we see innovation as the key to how we are going to stay in a leadership position, not just as transportation agencies, but as a Commonwealth. In fact, in the legislation that created the Massachusetts Department of Transportation in 2009, our legislature mandated that there be an Office of Performance Management and Innovation. And that office is headed by our Assistant Secretary, Rachel Bain, who will be moderating the panel for you this morning, and who coordinates our efforts across the Department of Transportation and the MBTA to put innovation and the use of data front and center in everything we do. Now, some people say that innovation is the future, but I think what you're going to hear from this panel this morning is that innovation is now. It is the present. It is happening around us every day, and the only question is our industry going to embrace that innovation or not? Because if we do not, it will happen without us. And some people I know, and I've heard this particularly on the transit side, see some of these technology innovations, whether it's the use of big data or the use of technology-enabled transportation platforms, as some kind of competition for what we in the public sector do. And I hope that what you will hear from this panel this morning is that what our partners in academia and the private sector are doing innovatively with data and technology is a complement, not a competition for what we do. We all share the same desire. Our job is to help people get where they need to go. And data, innovation, technology, as our invocation speaker was saying, are all a part of making that happen. So at MassDOT and the T, we do not see innovative industries that are using technology and data to give people more transportation choices as competition. We see them as complements, we see them as collaborators, we see them as partners. And I hope what you will learn this morning is how all of us inside the industry can use data, use technology to give our customers more ways of getting where they need to go, to embrace technology as a solution to many of the most daunting challenges that face us, and to embrace the collection, use, analysis, and application of data as a way that each of us can do all of our jobs better every day. So I'm going to introduce Rachel, who's going to moderate the panel, and I hope that you all learn from this very distinguished group. I'm looking forward to learning from them as well. Thank you.
Good morning. It is very nice to be with all of you today, and I have to thank the secretary, and I also have to thank my friend and mentor, Celia Blue, who helped us organize this event, her friend Rose Yates, and Kristen Diamond, who made it very easy for our participants today to get their presentations together and coordinate all of us with busy schedules. I want to echo Dr. Sori's earlier. Everyone up here are big picture people. So no fear, I think that you guys are going to see some great presentations today. Our first speaker is Dr. Ryan Chin. He is from the MIT Media Lab, and he is going to be talking to us today about autonomous vehicle technology.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm very privileged to be here, not only because I can walk to this hotel, because I live just not a few blocks away. I can take transit to go across the river and dream about the future every day at the Media Lab. That's what I do every day as I think about the future, not only in terms of how we live in cities, but also how we get around in cities. And so what I'll show today is sort of the beginning of a disruptive technology that you are probably aware of, which is the emergence of the autonomous vehicle. And we've heard about the safety benefits of autonomous vehicles, the potential benefits in congestion savings. But I also want to bring to your attention the combination of three different sort of areas, not just connected autonomous vehicles, but also electric vehicles, and then new shared transportation. I believe in our research is in this area of looking at the kind of triangulation of new technology, new business models, and how they fit and change the demographic changes that we see in cities, primarily to provide the maximum benefit of autonomous vehicles, as well as the ability to democratize mobility within cities. Now, connected autonomous vehicles has been around for a while. In fact, a lot of the research has been more than 20 years in the making, and in Europe more than 30 years in the making. Autonomous vehicles provide potential benefit in terms of connected communication between vehicles, the ability to reduce accidents, as well as the ability in the long term to even lower the weight of the vehicle. In a world where accidents don't happen, you don't need to have all this structure around you in a private automobile or in any kind of vehicle. In fact, one of the reasons why a lot of the experts in the autonomous vehicle world look at the safety benefits is because of human error. This is a diagram just showing you sort of the breakdown of the reasons why people get into accidents. And you can see here a significant amount of it is caused by human beings. We can highlight here alcohol, drinking, texting. All these things that happen are because of humans. And so almost 93% of all the accidents are attributable to that. And so autonomous vehicles can actually begin to address that issue. This little diagram shows you some of the benefits, not only from a financial point of view, but from a societal point of view. And you can see from this diagram that safety is obviously one of the first things, but that's the first thing that people think about. The other is, of course, ability to free up leisure time or work time in the vehicle. You can imagine being in a vehicle now and actually working and doing texting legally in a vehicle. You could do your homework. You can watch a movie. You can do all those things that you couldn't do before that was a burden in driving. But the greatest benefit actually comes when you start to think about the shared transportation network and the combination of that with mobility. You can see the financial benefit from that, and I can get into that in a second. But for you to get a sense of the technology, this is a little video of MIT's autonomous vehicle going through Harvard Square. You can see from this LiDAR scan the immediate resolution around the vehicle and how you can see people moving around. And Harvard Square, if you've been through it, is actually a very crowded intersection. You can see what the potential is to be able to have a high-resolution image of localized information around you. And of course, if you connect that with the idea of connected vehicles, where vehicles start to talk to each other, you could imagine a future intersection where you don't actually have to have signals anymore. This is a sort of provocation of a future intersection, right? Where you don't need to stop at all. Forget about traffic signals, forget about traffic lights, all that could be embedded into the car itself. Now, of course, one of the big challenges for intersections is how do you, if you have a driverless vehicle, communicate to pedestrians? How do pedestrians know when the car is going to move? And so we've developed this platform called Evita, which is a testing platform to provide sort of humanoid or human characteristics, anthropomorphic characteristics to the vehicle itself. So in this vehicle, the vehicle actually has eyes that follow you. And as it sees you, it begins to communicate and tell you, oh, well, it's now safe to cross the street because I recognize that you want to cross the street. One of the questions there is, should this be done through audio, through visuals? What languages should you be using? This is all part of the research that we're trying to do over at MIT. And of course, autonomous vehicles, this is an array of companies and academic institutions looking at autonomous vehicles. So it's already happening. And you can see sort of the list of organizations that are doing that work. The other area that I think is very exciting is a combination of the shared economy. You might have seen this picture. This is the picture of the American dream from the 1950s. But actually, that's over for many people, and really, especially for the millennials. I'll read this quote. It basically says, since the end of World War II, new cars and suburban homes have powered the world's largest economy and our most impressive recoveries, but millennials have lost interest in both. If you talk to young people today, car ownership has dropped, licenses have dropped for teenagers, vehicle miles has dropped, although there's a little uptake recently. And that's primarily because of the shared economy. And of course, this element of Uber and Lyft and all these other sort of shared vehicle systems have come to become very popular with young people. The Economist came out with this article a number of years ago that looked at, or a year ago, looked at the consumptive economy. And you can imagine not just not owning a car, not owning a home anymore, but also not owning your music, not owning a dog and renting one whenever you needed one. So you can start thinking about what this means for your life, an asset-free life in the city. And in fact, if you look at the share of operators moving into this space, you can see it's a very impressive list. You have not only Zipcar, which originated out of MIT, was 15 years ago, but you also have all new players in this shared space, not just operators, but also car manufacturers getting into car sharing as well. So this is a very impressive thing in terms of how fast we've gotten to this. Another one that's actually very exciting to me is Uber Pool. This Pool, Lyft Line, these are all new systems that allow not only sharing, but also pooling of resources. So you pick up a stranger along the way to maximize the utility of the vehicle and the number of occupants in the vehicle. The last area is electric powertrains. I'm not going to get into this very much, but to say that there is huge benefit in moving into an agnostic type of energy consumptive vehicle type. In fact, electric vehicles are, almost every manufacturer has one in the pipeline or already is producing them. So the convergence of this shared electric autonomous world, the convergence is actually where all the power comes from, is the ability to put those things together. In fact, Nature put out a recent article just this week around the idea of autonomous taxicabs and what the environmental benefit is for that. And I generally agree with some of the research findings, which say that if we move to a world where there are sort of robotic taxicabs that bring people around, pick them up, drop them off, and maximize the utility rate, we can reduce not only emissions, which at a significant level, but also the parking requirements in cities, which is significant. You can imagine the reduction to almost near zero. Now, one example that I want to show you to make it concrete for you, and I'll wrap up with that in the next slide after this, is what's happening in Singapore. MIT has a huge research project in Singapore to look at autonomous vehicles in the island nation. And if you've ever been to Singapore, Singapore is a very small island, 5.4 million people, 800,000 private automobiles. But most people in Singapore take public transit. 80% of the population does. And that's because they have world-class transit. So one of the questions that was asked was, what happens if we take those vehicles and we make them shared and we make them autonomous? How many vehicles would you actually need from the 800,000? It turns out that you can reduce that to 300,000 cars on the road. And not just providing mobility for the 20% that are privileged enough to have an automobile, but everyone in the entire island, which is an amazing statistic with the maximum wait time of around 20 minutes or so with this shared economy. Now, this is interesting because what happens to public transit in this type of question or this type of hypothetical situation? It turns out that Singapore is not going to turn off its public transit network. It spent billions of dollars doing that. So, in fact, you actually need even less vehicles than this to move people around, especially if you try to solve the last and first mile. And so what I'll show you now is an animation of Kendall Square, which is just across the river, where we took that statistic and we started to look at what is required at MIT, or the area around MIT, in fact, around the Volpe Center. And you'll see here that we're shifting from private vehicles to shared vehicles, and we move the amount of parking dramatically drops. And when you start to think about communication and collaboration between vehicles, you can imagine the significant drop in not only parking, but also user time and the amount of vehicles that are moving around. So this is a significant impact that we see happening in cities. The last slide I'll show you is this one, which is what happens then if you start thinking about autonomous shared vehicles as part of a larger network. And we have this idea of on-demand transportation, mobility on demand, as a large multimodal transportation network where you have traditional transit, you have walking and biking, but you also have the introduction of first and last mile autonomous pods that actually bring people to transit to create complementary networks. I believe that traditional transit, and of course traditional transit can improve by looking at automated systems, you can create a synergistic and potentially complementary system where you have these shared vehicles that bring people to transit, create intermodality between the two, and get our cities to really rethink and reclaim a lot of the land for the actual uses that we want. Places for people to live, places for people to have parks, places for people to have urban amenities. Then we can make our city much more walkable in the end. It's actually an enabling technology for that. Thank you very much.
I always like seeing Dr. Chin present the future, although I don't know if I would want to be in one of those cars that is weaving past each other. Our next speaker is Nat Buse from NHTSA, who's going to give us a federal perspective.
Good morning, Comto. So my job in, 7 minutes or less, is to try to tell you how US DOT is putting what you just saw into action. It's actually a really, really exciting time to be in transportation, and I'm going to add the word transportation safety. Our job is to make sure that all what you saw on the screen gets implemented in a safe way, because it's more than just getting people from point A to point B, it's getting them there in like one piece. In 2013, we lost 32,719 people on the nation's roadways. It's the equivalent of a plane falling out of the sky every day. You can imagine the public outrage that would happen if that was kind of accepted in a way that vehicle crashes are accepted. Whether it's the brother and sister or mother or father that are not coming home, or it's the pedestrian that just happened to be walking across the street, NHTSA touches all of those lives in one way, shape, or form. And we do it in one of two ways. One is our behavioral programs, which most people are familiar with. Those are the click it or ticket programs, our drunk driving programs that you see every so often. You might remember the Super Bowl time with the car filling up with the beer and the cop pulls the guy over. Those are all kind of sponsored by your tax dollars and filtered out to the states. What I am on is on the vehicle side. So the vehicle side is sort of where one could say the rubber meets the road with the vehicle manufacturers and suppliers. So we do everything from consumer information programs, the government's 5-star rating program, but also in particular the research and rulemakings that really drive safety down to the cheapest vehicle that you can buy. And so right now we're sort of at an interesting time. And I'll talk about the first one, which is connected vehicles. So it's to explain a little bit about what connected vehicles is. It's two devices talking to each other essentially over what most people would call Wi-Fi, but it's modified. And we've been working on this program for about a decade, very quietly with the manufacturers, with suppliers, trying to bring what started out as an idea on a napkin to bring it to reality. And so last year we had a really big announcement where the Secretary of Transportation said we're going forward with the rulemaking. That's kind of a big step. We then followed that announcement up actually releasing what's called an advance notice of proposed rulemaking last fall. That's the first step. It's kind of the earliest step you could take in writing a rule. And so the Secretary was sort of very excited about the prospects of this technology, and just a few months ago asked us to even accelerate the rulemaking process even faster. So my team, along with some others, are pushing to develop a real proposal that would be published by this administration in 2016. And so that is a big deal. That means that we will specify how vehicles will talk to each other, the security protocols involved in that, how we're going to test it, and a few other things. The unique thing about this proposal is we're not specifying what we would call safety applications. So we're just specifying what data has to be transmitted at what rate, and the manufacturers are going to innovate. It seems to be the buzzword of the day is innovate. And what we think they'll innovate on is a couple things. They might offer applications to consumers having to do with traffic or parking or something like that. Of course, we're very selfish and interested in the safety applications, and they actually plan to introduce those too. The interesting thing that's happening, though, right now is spectrum is at a premium. When we started this work about a decade ago, it was like moving to a farm in Utah somewhere. I mean, it was like very quiet real estate up there. Now we all want to download and watch the latest episode of Empire or Breaking Bad, and spectrum is not free. I shudder to think how much this piece of spectrum that we're using to work on this technology, what it really costs in today's dollars. But the fact of the matter is that we believe it's important because of the life-saving potential that it brings. We did a calculation. It's about 80% of non-impaired crashes that this technology can address. That is a big number. I've been involved in transportation safety for about 15 years, and we've never found anything that's quite like this. Its uniqueness and able to be applied to so many vehicles at one time, but also the fact that it actually can be retrofitted. Most of the technologies we work on have to be built into the vehicle. This technology actually lends itself to being retrofitted. Well, the problem, because of our demand, is that it creates a conflict with the telcos and the cable companies. So they want to offer all of us those services that we all want, but there's no more spectrum left. So there's a big debate going on right now, in fact, over spectrum. In fact, I'm supposed to be on a call at 11:30 with the Secretary's office to try to figure out a path forward. So I say that because as an organization, that's one issue where you can get involved in, right? I can tell you that the folks who want to take the spectrum away are up on the Hill like daily, talking to Congress, telling them that NHTSA and DOT aren't using it, that it's going wasted, and I can tell you that it's not. Not only are we moving forward with rulemaking, there are states that are very actively waiting for us to push on this technology, states like Michigan and Florida and a few others that are already deploying or plan to deploy technology to use, take advantage of this signal. And so we continue to push on that. At the same time, there are folks that want to start this unnecessary debate, we think, about the place of automated vehicles with respect to this technology, and whether, basically is the department regulating the beta tape while everybody's moved on to DVDs. We don't think so. We think that it's both technologies together. You got to think of it like this. Most of the technologies that will get us to automated vehicles, whether it's camera, radar, LiDAR, et cetera, those all have gaps. They have gaps in coverage. They're basically as good as, line of sight. What communications technology gets you is the ability to kind of see around corners, the ability to deal with weather, some other things like that, right now there is no other technology. The other thing to point out is we think this technology can save lives now, right? All the autonomous vehicles that are being developed are still in development. This is a technology that's been proven. We ran 3,000 vehicles in the state of Michigan over a year with real people in them, and the technology worked. It delivered warnings, and so we feel pretty confident that this is the right play for transportation safety. And we're only talking about just cars talking to cars. The real explosion will be cars talking to the infrastructure, everything from talking to stoplights when you're going through at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and there's no one else around and you're wondering why you have to sit at a red light. Well, that could probably be eliminated with this technology, where the light would be able to know that you're coming and no one else is coming around you and turn that light green. You can do other things like the green wave, where you could sort of plan out your route and your speed such that you're not stopping and going, stopping and going, stopping and going. And then even things like on the rail side, rail crossings continue to kill a number of people every year. This technology is extensible to that, where it could be on the train, it could be at the grade crossing, and be able to provide kind of an instantaneous solution to that nagging problem. On the flip side, we think that these onboard systems are great. We are pushing as hard as we can on those too, right? We're not picking winners and losers, we're picking them all. One of the things that we're doing with the onboard systems is trying to figure out what's the best way to test them. So one of the ones we just moved forward on is automatic emergency braking. This technology comes in 2 flavors. Essentially, the first flavor is if you apply the brakes, but just not hard enough, the vehicle can sense that you're about to run into somebody and give you the full maximum braking capability of the vehicle. The other type is if you're distracted and looking out the window or doing whatever you're doing, and the car senses that you're going to end in a rear end impact, and it applies the brakes automatically. We couldn't have done this like 5 years ago, and yet these technologies are here and now. So one of the things we announced in January was we were going to put that particular technology into our consumer information program called NCAP, and give consumers awareness that it's there so they can make a proper choice about picking a vehicle with that technology on it, and then hopefully get that technology down into the lower price ranges, because it's really difficult to regulate everything. And so we want to use all the tools at our disposal to try to make sure that these technologies get what we call democratized, a way to get down to everybody, because we don't think that safety should just be available to people who drive around in S-classes or BMW 7 Series. We think it should go down to Ford Focuses and other vehicles like that. And so for us, it's not a competition between these onboard systems and the connected systems. They all go together to converge to bring us truly that ultimate future of full self-driving. And so for that, one of the things we're doing is we have a very, very aggressive research plan to try to figure out how we're going to test autonomous vehicles. We know how to test very well when things go bad. We have tests that cover many, many situations like that. But what does everyday driving look like? It's a real challenge because some of that stuff you just cannot do on a test track. It's very dangerous. And then the rest of the time you have to do it in the environment, sort of. And then everybody knows it's really hard. You can run a study for a year and not have one crash. And so trying to figure out what the right balance there is, testing, is to make sure it's safe, is one of the things that we're really, really focused on. The other 2 things I'll tell you just quickly is privacy is a big deal. I was up on the Hill last week, and privacy was a big thing that is on the minds of the Congress. very much concerned about how, whether it's a state DOT, whether it's vehicle manufacturers, how they're going to use the data that will be coming out from these vehicles, even though it is completely anonymous. The other thing is cybersecurity. It doesn't help that in the past few months we've had every single, it seems like anyway, government system broken into by some unknown person, stealing PII and things like that. And so cybersecurity is a very big concern. People are concerned that the autonomous vehicle will get hacked by someone and drive off a cliff or something. We have a very aggressive program to deal with that, and we're actually making some announcements in the next few weeks about that. So with that, the future is bright, very much exciting for transportation and transportation safety. A lot of technology is coming, and the challenge is to make sure that they're deployed in a way that's safe for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Nat. So we're going to shift gears a little bit, and I'm going to bring up Dominic Trebone from MassDOT's Office of Performance Management and Innovation. Dominic's going to talk to us a little bit about real-time data and how that drives performance at MassDOT and the MBTA.
Perfect. Good morning, everyone, for the 5th time. So my innovation here is going to be squeezing a 10-minute presentation into 5 minutes. Where's the clicker thing? Oh. When you're at MIT, these are attached to your body, so you're just sort of used to it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, at the MBTA specifically, how we're taking all of the data that we have from our wonderful systems and basically doing performance analytics that are about people on transit, not transit vehicles themselves, because that's really what matters. So brief history of information and technology in transit. A couple, maybe 20 years ago, we got information about where buses and trains are, and we gave that to dispatchers, and that was great. A little bit after that, we started saying, hey, we can tell customers where the trains are. So we developed these customer information systems and push the information to the station, to our station. So when you're in the station, you can see when the train is coming. That was really convenient. And then we decided we could also put that information on the internet. And that means people can access it not just when they're in the station, but before they get to the station. And that was kind of really great for people, particularly in buses. They could, before they leave their house, they can know when the bus is coming, if it's running late, if it's running early. And that's been really, really a huge success for us. And in the very near future, actually kind of right now at the MBTA, we're taking that real-time information and turning it into performance information that goes both to the customers in that same feed about real-time information, so real-time performance in addition to just vehicle location, and going back into our own dispatch center about how our service is performing right now. So this is a brief overview of our real-time information system. It takes all of the train, bus, commuter rail locations along with our schedules, which are in the GTFS or General Transit Feed Specification format, puts them all up in mixes, does a whole lot of math and other sort of conversions to make them all play nice together, and then pushes that out in 2 feeds. One is GTFS real-time, which is a specification, part of the specification that's specifically about real-time information, and that goes mostly to Google Maps and other people who know how to use that feed. And the other is an API, an application programming interface, where anyone who wants to can just access the data. And this has been really, really successful. We have, I think, 60 or 70 apps that access our data, plus a bunch of websites that we don't really count, that also access the data and give it to our customers. So this has been a great success for MBTA customers and sort of aggregating information all in one place. And it also includes the alerts of whether we have a service disruption somewhere. And this has been really, really popular. So the next level here is, it's the next level both for real-time information, including performance in real time, and it's the next level for performance reports, because your performance report is usually historical. It's what was happening yesterday, what was happening last month. I want to know what's happening right now. And so these performance reports, it's not just the real time, they're also customer oriented. So it's not how are my trains doing, it's how are my customers doing. They're public and they're on an open standard. So sort of all these buzzwords that we really love right now, we tried to roll them all into this one project. So I'll start a little bit with the metrics that we're using that are customer oriented. Because we have automated fare collection and automated vehicle location, we know where the people are, we know where the vehicles are, we can measure the really two big important things of transit: how long people are waiting and how long it takes them to get from point A to point B. And we set thresholds, and we say, all right, what % of customers waited less than the scheduled headway? And we do it on the unique level of the vehicle, so it's not an average headway, it's whatever the headway was right then for that station. Did you wait less than that, or did you wait more than that? If you waited more than that, you're a 1, everyone else is a 0, and that is aggregated up so we can know that whatever on this day, 87% of our customers waited less than the scheduled headway. And that's a really, I mean, that's actually pretty good. I think our goal is 90, but 87 is pretty good. And we do the same thing for travel time. We know we can infer pretty much where customers are going on the system, and we know how long it took the trains and buses to get there. And we can say, okay, well, you know, what % of our customers actually got to their destination, at least within the transit system, with less than a 3-minute delay, with less than a 6-minute delay. And those metrics are what we're using now at the MBTA to measure our performance for the previous day. So now we're going to do it in real time. And this is, let's cut off a little bit, that's fine. Using the real-time data that's in the GTFS system rather than the data that's in the train control system. And we're measuring schedule adherence, travel times, headways, dwell times, passenger wait times, and passenger travel times. And this is a lot of advantages. You can probably think of a few, but one, it's 100% sample of data. We're not doing ride checks, we're none of that. We're actually just measuring everything. And we have the individual observation of each train, each bus. So we can aggregate however we want. If you want to know how was this stop doing yesterday from 3:30 to 6:30, I can tell you that. If you want to know how has the orange line been doing since the AM peak, I can tell you that. I can do it over whatever time scale I want and whatever geography I want because we actually are recording the individual observation. And the other advantage, sort of more globally about this approach, is that it's a common standard of data. It's the GTFS format is sort of emerging as the common format for schedule data in the US at least, the US and North America generally. And GTFS real time is kind of right behind that for real time. So the idea is that I could actually measure any agency that has GTFS real time data against the same standards. I can benchmark my performance against someone else's performance and be sure that I'm using the exact same thresholds to measure that agency. And so in Massachusetts, for example, that would allow us to measure all of the regional transit authorities and the MBTA in the same way, against the same standard, with basically the same process. And another little thing we decided to do here was to make this code open source. There's no reason the MBTA should be the only one measuring its performance like this, so we decided that this code will be available when we're done with it to any agency that wants to use it and modify it for its own purposes. And almost everything in there is also open source software, with the exception of MS SQL, but I think most agencies have that. So a brief overview of how the system works. Again, it's taking in the bus, commuter rail, and heavy rail information. It's going into this performance system, which will then go to the customers. And it just does a whole bunch of calculations with the real-time data, augmenting it with a little bit of archive data to set the thresholds, and our archive passenger information. We use archive passenger information so that you're not varying both your passenger demand and your performance, and you don't know, well, is it low because my performance was bad, or is it low because my passenger volume was low? So that's one of the sort of decisions. We use passengers as a weight, not as an actual number. And it also gets around a little bit of it makes it easier technically, which I won't get into. So this is a website that I have right now where it allows me to select whatever line, whatever station, whatever day I want, and gives me the performance numbers, and also a graph of the headways, which are right here, of like every headway over the course of the day, and every travel time over the course of the day. And one little thing I'll get to, because Rachel wanted me to mention this, is the only glitch here is that we didn't actually have information on the green line. We didn't know where the trains were. And that's kind of a problem for trying to measure performance. So what we ended up doing, sort of an innovative way of getting GPS on these trains, was instead of hiring a big systems integrator to like put GPS on the trains and buy a CAD system, we just put GPS. We bought a GPS unit, we put it on the train, gave it power, and did all the integration ourselves. And it cost us like less than $1 million for the fleet. It involved a lot of development work on our times, but we have to do that work anyway with a systems integrator because we know our system better. And that really accelerated the project and has enabled us to deliver performance information and real-time information on the green line much faster than we would have had we gone with sort of the traditional procurement approach. So with that, I think I actually made it under 5 minutes, and I'll let Rachel get back up here.
They can only work for me if they talk fast. So the next speaker we're going to bring up is Don Batsford, and he's going to tell us what's going on at Google.
Thank you. Glad to be here. So my name is Don Batsford. I work with Google. And Google owns a number of companies, and one project company that we have is called Waze. And Waze, let's just jump right into it and talk about what Waze is trying to do. To summarize what Waze is trying to do in one mission statement would be save every driver 5 minutes every day. And that doesn't seem significant maybe to the individual driver, but in aggregate, it's a significant savings across a Commonwealth, across the country, across the world. And how's that happen? Waze is an application. It's as simple as you download it onto your phone. Many of you are already users of it. And it tells you, similar to how your GPS or your wayfinding system in your car would tell you how to get from point A to point B, but not always the shortest route, because there are things in the way quite often, and those can be planned events, or those can be unforeseen events, or traffic, or reported events by the users. And so quite often, taking a large detour will give you a net savings in time to transport from one place to the other. And so this exchange of information actually happens between the individual applications that are on the phone. You have one, I have one, we're driving along, and it's checking on how fast we're going. Okay, this road seems to be moving along, but then our sister on the road right next to us is going very slow. Our cousin is going very slow. Let's avoid those areas. It can see in aggregate that we're talking back and forth to each other. But then also there's another part to this, which is the partners. Government agencies can give and receive information, and that's a two-way street. That's not just an arrow one way. As a state or city, you can give and receive information from Waze. So, and this information, when you're pushing it out, can be something that's very useful to somebody. They might not know if the 405 in Los Angeles is closed down because of an event. There's no reason that you should be going through the 405. LA is notorious for traffic, and I think that they have come to tolerate very long wait lines in some car instances, but it shouldn't be the norm that they have to just drive into it if they can be made aware. And also things like Amber Alerts and crises, whether they be typhoons or natural disasters or things that are coming about that nobody could have foreseen. You can notify users through the application themselves, and then that has a lot of application outside of just traffic. It's humanitarian. And what are some of the things that, you know, the governments and the DOTs and the partners that Waze has can communicate into the system? Well, these can be planned events, sporting events, celebrations. Obviously, that's a big congestion block. There's construction. There's 4th of July celebration. There's something the president's coming in. It's going to have special concerns about where people can drive. In addition, there's going to be things like weather. And Boston's February was just terrible. The concerns with just getting from point A to point B were, is it possible to get from point A to point B? And then also there's going to be gatherings of people. There's going to be things that we don't know about yet. There's unforeseen. But the opportunity, it's not even this specific set of pieces of data. It's the concept that two people having phones in their car are making those phones communicate into the meta set of data. But then also as partners, what we as an organization here can do is communicate in to help them get about their day. And so here's an example. This is Boston in the Super Bowl celebration. And you can see here on the right side of the screen, there's a line of don't go here, essentially. This is a planned route, and there's no reason that anybody should stumble into this. And even if you weren't aware of this event, you should be made aware of it if you're going to be driving into it. And this data comes in pretty standard formats, a combination of one of these. It's really not important what the format is, just the fact that we can communicate it up. And there's only a few bits that need to be sent along. Where is the problem? As a partner, you can say, okay, we're going to be shutting down this block. Please don't drive through it. And then you won't have people trying to find their way around because you can navigate
much earlier around that situation. We have a number of partners that we're doing this connected partnership with. Waze obviously has tens of thousands of people in every neighborhood using the application, but the government relationship is with cities, it's with state or Commonwealth, as Massachusetts refer to it, and they're all working with us. And so the question, ultimately, as a user, please download Waze. It's free, and you can play with it, and it's fun. And if you find it's useful, that's great. You can integrate it as part of your life. But what can you do with the information? How can it benefit you professionally? And this is an example of the data that we're gathering in a metropolitan area and just a front end that we're creating so that people can see where situations are arising. This exists right now for partners. This is a traffic center, and it almost gives a grade at the top. Traffic is mostly bad. And the point is this is going to evolve, but we're taking this data and we're aggregating it. And somebody's building something outside. And we're aggregating this data, and that's great. And this is fine if you want this canned impression of what this data should look like. But in addition, there's a feed we're kicking out, and Waze is kicking out all this information not personally identifiable, by the way. Google's really concerned with privacy. But this aggregation, you can take this and you can integrate it into any of the other systems that you already have. And that can be really beneficial for you if you have data that you're trying to fix problems or even trying to identify where they would be. In your Traffic Operations Center, we have a screenshot here on the bottom. That's actually in South America, but where it only took a very short amount of time for this data to immediately be something that these professionals could take action upon immediately. You know, on the right side of the screen, you see that Boston Wazers are reporting potholes. You know, it's not just about getting from point A to point B. Sometimes it's where does the infrastructure need repair? Also, when accidents happen, people call 911. Quite often, the next thing that happens is somebody's reporting it on Waze, which is great and terrible in the same breath. And that we'll have an understanding of where problems are going to happen almost before the gridlock happens. And so Sandy is an example of where gas became a problem. Nationally, gas was a problem, but mostly specifically in a couple neighborhoods where, along the coast, where we weren't sure what was going on the ground level. And this back and forth communication allowed not only transportation, but transportation concerns where fuel trucks could be routed to where there wasn't fuel, and where people could then share, here's where it is. And that allows people to save time so they're not hunting, going from place to place or waiting in line. No sense in waiting in line if 9 blocks that way there is gas. Why wait in line here? And the concept that we could, as professionals, be communicating up to the community where there are resources, let's do that. And this can be a humanitarian thing. It can be done for major events. We don't have to have all the answers right now, but we can plan for events and use this technology to reach out to people. And then this can be analyzed and cut 100 different ways. And you can see that this is something where you can think about, okay, what did we do last time? How do we prepare for this event, this visit, this celebration? And you can make changes for it in the long run. And I think that anytime you have this amount, this statistically significant amount of information that's happening year over year, that it will become where you have heat maps and you'll have knowledge of where you can implement real change that impacts individuals. And this is a GPS modified application that was user built, and we're talking about changing people's lives. So we're excited about it. And also it has many other applications that we haven't even thought of. Routing emergency vehicles the quickest way. People have a sense of the community, they know how to get around, but if there is some circumstance, or if there's something where you want to know where accidents are happening, maybe we need to send the plow there. Obviously, as a regional focus. And then on top of all this, it was just announced, it's not even in this deck, that pooling of resources is now going to be part of this too, where ride sharing is now going to be. So I just want to leave you with ways, and Google in general wants to aggregate the world's information and make it universally acceptable. And if we can save everybody 5 minutes every day, we can make the world a better place, simply through that alone. But in addition, we heard, and I was very inspired about the big picture concept, thinking about what's happening tomorrow. And if we think that there's going to be this back and forth of information, then we can really embrace the fact that we can plan to make all of the things that we have concerns for right now and identify them and make them better for tomorrow. So thank you. And if you have any interest, if you have any interest in this, there is a URL here, just CCP, and you can go and fill out an interest form for your state, city, or community. Thank you very much.
So our final speaker today is Jared Kadich, and he is from the MassDOT Highway Division, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about integrated corridor management, particularly their Route 3 project.
Hello, everyone. For those of you not familiar with integrated corridor management, this was an effort initiated by Federal Highway in 2007. The vision was to optimize the use of existing infrastructure by leveraging unused capacity in a multimodal fashion. So what ICM does is it looks at all of your assets along a corridor. It says, where do we have capacity to either shift drivers onto transit or vice versa? What can we do to optimize the operations of the corridor? In 2009, 8 pioneer states began developing a concept of operations for an ICM. In 2013, 2 corridors were demonstrated in San Diego and Dallas. And finally, where our story begins with MassDOT is the solicitation of grants from USDOT and Federal Highway. And what you're going to see now with that solicitation of grants is ICM really is going to come to the fore nationally as something that DOTs are embarking on to optimize their operations of transportation. So ICM on Route 3, why is Route 3 the perfect corridor for ICM? First, Route 3 stretches from Cape Cod to Boston. It connects South Shore employers with employment centers in the Boston metro area. Route 3 features a number of alternatives to single occupancy travel, including 3 commuter rail lines that parallel the Route 3 corridor, 2 rapid transit hubs in the northern section of the corridor that operate at capacity during the weekday. Commuters can reach Boston with ferry connections in Hingham and Hull and can reach the city in just 20 minutes. There's also privately operated bus service along the corridor that stretches from Cape Cod into Boston. And there's also a 2+ HOV lane where drivers can save on average 12 to 15 minutes during the morning peak period. So these alternatives to drive-alone travel make Route 3 an excellent test bed for looking at how the operations of these assets can be integrated in such a way that demand can actively be managed. Moreover, the project is also an investigation. It's an investigation into the choices travelers make and the perceptions and attitudes towards alternative modes of transportation. We as system operators need to understand the factors that animate people's daily choices with regard to mode before we can begin to develop short-term and long-term solutions to managing demand. So what makes the Route 3 project unique here at MassDOT? There's really three themes. The first is multi-agency collaboration. The ICM project includes representatives from MassDOT Highway, MBTA, commuter rail operations, Rail and Transit, Federal Highway Planning, and Rachel's Office of Performance Management and Innovation. We've also engaged partners at the Transportation Management Associations who work directly with employers to coordinate commuting options and various TDM strategies. The second unique theme is that we've engaged the public through a commuter survey and focus groups. We're asking the public what makes you tick, what makes you make your decision, and what can we do to improve. And thirdly, we're engaging the private sector, who is going to have a huge role to play in identifying and providing 21st century transportation solutions. This engagement is meant to identify opportunities for collaboration between the public and private sectors, and more broadly, to provide a better vision for MassDOT about how P3 can be leveraged in a low-cost, low-impact environment. So I'm going to skip over the project approach, but essentially we're using a modified systems engineering approach guided by 4 tasks. We're currently in the 3rd task, which is concept assessment. I'm also going to skip over some of the data we have today This is just a speed threshold analysis speaking about the recurring congestion on Route 3. And then the parking availability, 5,500 empty spaces remain each day at commuter rail. This data just lends itself to the high level feasibility of doing this. If we're going to get people off of the roadway and onto transit, there has to be parking available, and the congestion needs to be bad enough to make them do it. So, like I said, right now we're in concept assessment. We're using 3 primary tools to assess the initial ideas we've come up with our project stakeholders. The first is a survey and focus group with commuters. I'm going to talk about a little bit of the survey data we've gotten from the 1,000 responses we've gotten from the project area. The second is a real-time operational test that we'll be initiating in the next week or 2. First, we had 3 main goals from our survey. And these were really to address gaps as they relate to the typical data sets you get when you're analyzing a project of this nature. First is when you're asked on when DOTs conduct a household travel survey, they primarily ask what your primary mode of transportation was. What we were really getting at with our survey is how often do people use a mode other than their primary mode? And so if we're looking at getting that shift in behavior, what would be really helpful if there's a large audience that sometimes drives and sometimes uses transit. Second, we wanted to learn how people are receiving traveler information and how they report this information influences their travel choices. So first here, we ask the question, if you report driving, how often do you use a mode other than driving? So what we found was a staggering 85% of respondents report that they always drive. So what we see is a rigidity, a reliance on single occupancy travel that really doesn't deviate very often. Second, how do you receive traveler information? This demographic overwhelmingly is relying on the more traditional means of traveler information, radio, TV, and our infrastructure on the roadway, our go time signs. And third, how does this information influence your travel choices? Most interesting here is the farthest to the right. Less than 10% report that they will change their mode based on traveler information. So again, the rigidity factor here. Let me conclude by talking a little bit about our operational tests, because I think this is the innovative piece that I think you all want to hear about. Our consultant has designed a system that interfaces to the same data feeds that Dom was talking about in his presentation and interfaces to our highway real-time travel time system. The system will compare, based on up-to-the-minute data, if travelers can save time by getting off the road, parking at a station, and taking transit to their destination. We'll be targeting 2 stations along the corridor and disseminating a various set of different messages. This one here, Save Time, Use Train 910, we'll be coupling this also with a social media campaign to inform drivers what these messages mean and how they can save time. We'll also be doing a statistical analysis that looks at if providing this information in this pilot had an impact on transit use. And if it did, you have really good data to support a more permanent system. And with that, I'm going to conclude. I'm going to leave time for Q&A with our guests on connected vehicles. Thank you.
Celia, how much time do I have for questions? 1 or 2? 2? Okay. So I'm going to pose this to the group. As I was listening to all these presentations, the thing that kept sticking out to me was how can government agencies leverage and incentivize the private sector? And what is the private sector looking for from federal government, state government, cities? Anybody want to take a crack at it? He's getting a raise.
Are these on? All right, they are. From my perspective, because mostly it's what I work on, is that the thing the government and the part of government that I work in has been really good at, I think, thus far, is providing information, providing standardized information and information that private entities know that they can trust. And I think that's always been a good role for government. I mean, I think going back to Adam Smith, it's one of the functions of government in the private economy is to provide baseline information so that everyone is working off the same assumptions. So that's what we've done at the MBTA and MassDOT, is we don't make apps. We provide data. You can make apps. And we've had a lot of success with the private sector developing apps and other sort of, I think, ways. I'm not sure if they integrate the real-time data that the state provides as background, but I know other websites will do, they provide the state data plus other data. So it really provides a good baseline for everyone to sort of work from.
On the vehicle side, I think it's twofold. The first thing is really trying to dispel this notion that the government stifles innovation. I think that I hear it constantly from whether it's a vehicle manufacturer, a technology provider that doesn't know us too well. There's this idea that, oh my gosh, NHTSA is coming here to shut us down. No, in fact, it's the opposite. I mean, I think if you look at what's happened over the past, 6 months with Takata airbags, you can see the tolerance that the Congress has and the public has for when things go very, very wrong. And that's just on a motor vehicle defect. So when we talk about these new technologies, one of the things we're trying to explain to technology providers and suppliers is that there is a way to do this safely. One of the things that the administrator likes to say, and I'm going to steal it from him, is imagine that you're flying anywhere. Do you get on the plane and say, well, let me see which of these aircraft is the safest aircraft? No, right? We all get on the plane knowing that it's a pretty safe vehicle and we're going to go from point A to point B, no problem. Except when it comes to vehicles, we seem to be fascinated by this idea that there's these levels of safety and you have to pay for it and things like that. Of course, there's room for innovation in the marketplace, and that's not what I'm trying to say. There are things that I think at the private industry level can do to encourage the safe introduction of technologies in a way that doesn't always have to rely on the federal government passing some sort of rule or mandate. I think that the other thing that has to happen is a willing to share information with the government. So first, it's government is stopping innovation, but this idea that you can trust government to sort of make the right decisions when it needs to make the right decisions. You never want sort of the government to be uninformed. That's when actually bad decisions get made. And so in this era with computing power and technologies coming faster and faster and faster, companies have to be willing to share information with the federal government and in a way that we can help kind of spurn that innovation along in a way that it's done safely, in a way that's reliable for the American public.
Anybody else? No? So, but I can ask a final question, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask the audience if anybody had a burning question. But we probably have room for one, because Celia's looking at me. So we have room for one. So I'm seeing, you're the first hand that I saw up, so you want to yell it out?
No, I'm doing it pretty loud. Can you hear me now?
That's excellent.
Okay, so my question is for Don. What's Google's plan to monetize the waves? What are you looking at for monetization?
So Waze is minimally monetized right now. You might see Dunkin' Donuts logos as you drive along your route. And I think Google has a history of creating something that's very, very useful and then monetizing it after the fact. And monetization is not necessarily the way Google builds its apps to start, whether that be search or maps. What we believe is that if we make things universally acceptable, people will come to it. And when you have a large audience, a business model builds itself up under that. And also the thing is that because Google has such a large umbrella, we don't even need to necessarily speculate that it itself needs to be monetized. A lot of these services are very complementary to each other. So you have to understand that I might not have all the insight in what, say, the Android team is doing, or what the search team is doing, or what a number of different companies that don't even exist in the public eye are doing, because in aggregate, this might be a feature set of consumer products or things that might exist out there later on. So if you're talking about cars Android Wear and phones. This can be something that supports the functionality and makes that other thing be the killer app.
I'm going to sneak in one more question if anybody has it. There you go.
My question is for Ryan. I wanted to know how the psychology of the American auto driver is how you apply that in your model. So, I mean, it looks great, but if we're not really looking at how the preferences are for auto drivers, if they would really choose to go into this new model of using these driverless vehicles. I just want to know how that would apply.
Yeah, well, we don't do, I mean, we're a research lab. We don't do focus groups and that marketing type of research. There's actually a lot of research out there that University of Michigan has done that looks at consumer preference towards autonomous vehicles. And it turns out that it's heavily slanted towards males. That's the first thing. Men are actually more open to looking at autonomous vehicles. And it's also dependent on age, too. So the older you are, the less likely you are. So that's a sort of general, at a high level, a general feeling around autonomous vehicles. I personally think that actually these systems need to be built and demonstrated for people to actually try them out. And in order to do that, you actually need to work with not only industry, but also the cities and governments themselves to pilot these programs and to expose them to in trials. And that's really ultimately what you need to do. In fact, often surveys are not very useful because people don't tell the full truth either. So I think you just need to build and build it, and they will probably come. We'll see what happens. But certainly, if you look at the theory behind it, certainly if we move towards this shared autonomous world, there are huge benefits for that. But it's very hard for the individual to see the collective benefit. They have to see the individual benefit first. And so often the big focus is on safety. And I think that that certainly is a benefit, but there are so many other layers of benefit behind that that can only be expressed once you have these kind of pilot programs.
I can actually add something to that very interesting question, because it's a challenge on two fronts. It's not only what Ryan just said, but it's another challenge, and the data is already pretty clear on that, is that there seems to be this trend where younger folks, let's say below 21, are choosing not to get their driver's license. So on one hand, I'm very happy about that because it helps on the teenage drinking numbers, and all those other numbers are plummeting, which is good. But the challenge is when they actually do decide to get their driver's license, then they're not, let's say, as good a drivers as they otherwise would have been because they haven't been practicing all those many years up until then. And so one of the things we're actually actively talking to some of the state DOTs about is how do we prepare the nation for not the ultimate full self-driving, but all these incremental steps that are going to happen along the way. And some of the research that's come out already has suggested that people buy these vehicles and they're not even aware what the technology does. And this is like at all levels. I mean, I had a CEO about 3 weeks ago was in to talk to us, and he was saying he got a phone call one day because his daughter was in some car that was in the fleet that he gave her, and the car stopped automatically, and she had no idea what had happened, but was thankful that it did because she would have gotten a crash. And here is somebody who's actually in the business, in the field, and his own family doesn't know how the technology works. And that's a constant trend that we keep seeing. And so how do you train drivers when they buy these new vehicles, or I think a bigger concept, I don't know if Ryan's even looked at this, but in a ride-sharing type environment where maybe it's not full self-driving, but it's some sort of interim level that has all these safety features. Do you train the drivers on how to use them and what to expect from this shared vehicle that you're using? So there are lots of challenges around kind of this evolutionary step that we're going, and an intermix of kind of the 1980s car with no technology and these other vehicles that have all this technology, and really what drivers are going to choose to do. It's a challenge that's coming at us pretty fast.
So I think that's all the time we have. I want to thank our panelists today, and thank Comto for having us here, and I hope you have a great conference for the rest of it.